Well, thank you all for having me. I hope you guys are ready to learn about millipedes and centipedes. These are, as Joe said, some weird, creepy crawlies, but they're very close and dear to my heart and pretty interesting creatures. So this is an outline of the talk today. I'm going to first talk about my research and what taxonomy and systematics really are. And then I'm going to go into what myriapods are, their biology and ecology, some of the millipedes that you may see around Virginia and in your gardens, and then other leaf litter critters that I've gotten into recently. All right, so I'm a taxonomist and a systematist. So taxonomy is the naming and description of new species. And systemics, or systematics, is figuring out how different species or groups of organisms relate to each other evolutionarily. So they kind of go hand in hand. You have to have names and descriptions of species to understand how they all relate to each other. My focus is on American millipedes, so I have done a lot of stuff in Appalachia, mainly. In Bahamas with a collaborator in the Dominican Republic. So getting into all sorts of American millipedes. And at this point, I've described over 70 species, but we've got, as I'll show you, a whole lot more to describe. So there's tons out there that still need to be discovered if anybody gets interested in this group. We need more people working on them. All right, so first I want to point out about the Virginia Museum of Natural History millipede collection. So it might seem kind of weird that they would hire a myriapodologist, but that is because the VMNH actually has the second largest millipede collection in the country and in the top 10 in the world. We have over 22,000 specimens, over 400 type specimens. So a type specimen is the little millipede, the actual one that was described in the paper. So if anyone wants to go back and compare whatever they've collected to the actual named species, that's the specimen they're going to look at. So a type specimen is really, really important for science. We have over 400. We have over 650 species that are undescribed that are in our collection that we know are new. And we have over 200 undescribed genera, which are larger groupings of species. So lots and lots to do. It's a really exciting collection to work with. And I should say the reason that we have such an awesome collection is because of the previous curator, Richard Hoffman, who was a just really, really prodigious myriapodologist, collected all sorts of things from all over the world. All right, so myriapods, it actually includes 4 different groups. So it's not just millipedes, it's not just centipedes. There's also these 2 other little tiny groups that most people don't know about, and there's really very few people studying them. So first, the pauropods. I like to call these the Twinkie millipedes. They look like little Twinkies. They are really tiny, about half a millimeter to 2 millimeters long. They have these branched antennae, and there's only about 800 species in the world, which sounds like a lot if you study vertebrates, but for invertebrates, that's not very many. And then the class Symphyla, these are the garden centipedes, and there's even fewer of these. There's about 200, though these you'll see all the time if you garden. You'll see these little white, pretty fast moving, their antennae move really fast, and they run around. They're totally harmless. They just eat detritus like everything else in this group that I'll talk about today, except for centipedes. And yeah, they're called garden centipedes, but they're actually a different group related. So that's all I'm going to really say about those. If you have any questions about them, feel free, but there's very little known. The other 2 classes are much larger. So class Chilopoda and class Diplopoda. Chilopods are the centipedes, diplopods are the millipedes. Centipedes can get really big. You may have seen some of the big scolopendromorph, scary centipedes out west or in the tropics that can bite and are really, really giant. About the biggest that we're going to get here is maybe 1.5 inches or so, and they can give you like a hornet sting level bite. They are predators. All centipedes are predators. They only have one pair of legs per body segment. Millipedes have two. And there's only about 3,000 species and 5 orders, so they're not very diverse. However, again, not very well studied. That's a common theme amongst all the things I work on, are that very few people work on them, mainly because they are not economically important. You know, they don't vector diseases, they don't eat crops, they're not really, you know, pests of any type. They don't really infest your house that often, sometimes, but for the most part, they're pretty overlooked. And then millipedes are a lot more diverse. They've got about 13,000 species at this point and 12 orders. And there are 2 pairs of legs per body segment, which, you know, most people know that millipedes have 4 legs per body segment, centipedes have 2. That's kind of the defining difference between them. But for the big one is really that millipedes are detritivores. You know, they're not predators, they're like cows. They break down leaf litter, they're very chill, they're slow moving. I like them a lot. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about centipedes. Again, they're not my specialty, but they are cool, and I want to give them their due. So these are the 4 main orders. There is a 5th order that is only known from Australia, from a couple species. It's real weird, but doesn't look any different than these, so I'm not really going to talk about it. But these are the ones that you'll find here. The scolopendromorphs are the big, scary-looking ones, and they're usually red or brown, fairly fast. They can give you a nice bite. The other centipedes that can give you a good bite are the lithobiomorphs. Those are stone centipedes, what they're called, because they're kind of gray or purple, and they blend in with the stone very fast. Geophilomorphs are really tiny and cannot bite you, but they are predators, and they can come in all sorts of cool colors. And there's probably a lot of undescribed species. They're mainly subterranean. They have no eyes, they're blind, they crawl around in the dirt, but again, very few people study them. And then scuchitromorphs are the ones that are nightmare fuel that people really, really hate. These are the ones that you get in your house. This is the house centipede. They have really long back legs, which allows them to what we call gallop, where when they run, their back legs go over their front legs, and it gives them this very kind of creepy, undulating appearance, but it lets them run very, very fast. They're really weird compared to the other centipedes. They have these prehensile tarsi, so their tarsi aren't just little claws like the other centipedes. They are these multi-segmented tentacles that can basically wrap around their prey. Which are pretty freaky, and they have fully compound eyes. They have really good vision, which other centipedes either have no eyes or they have really simple, kind of lighter dark movement eyes. These guys have really, really highly advanced eyes, so bizarre group for centipedes. All right, now they also have venom feet. So, you know, most people call these jaws, but these are actually modified feet. They are not mouth parts. They are the first pair of legs modified into venom-delivering weapons. And they're very cool. All right, enough about centipedes. Centipedes are awesome, but they're not what I work on. I work on millipedes. So as I said, millipedes have 4 pairs of legs per body segment because 2 of their body segments have fused. So they have diplo segments. So their body, you know, if you look on the underside, you can kind of see the fusion still. And they can have as few as 24 legs. And recently, we just described the first true millipede. So before Eumillipes Persephone, there was no millipede that had 1,000 legs. The name millipede would mean 1,000 feet. But they only had 750. That was the most of any millipede. And we found in Australia, living about 200 feet underground, this blind, extremely multi-segmented little millipede that has like a beak for a mouth and probably feeds off of bacteria that are living deep in the earth. So that was really cool. So that's the first true millipede. Most of the millipedes have their mouth parts modified into like a grinding plate to break down detritus. Some of them have beaks to suck up like fungus or any kind of liquidy bacteria or anything. Those are usually really tiny millipedes. And their antennae are clubbed with 4 sensory cones at the tip. That's rather esoteric, but it's important. And they are usually chemically defended. So most of the millipedes, none of them can bite, but almost all of them produce chemical defenses, including hydrogen cyanide. So these big, colorful millipedes that we have around here do produce hydrogen cyanide. All right, this is not super important. All I want to show here is that their bodies are actually pretty simple. They basically are composed of a head, and then a long tube, and then a butt. So that's about it. They eat, and then it goes out, and they poop. And that's just like every other organism, I guess, but very simple organisms in the grand scheme of things. So for our identification purposes, people always want to know how we tell these species apart, and we use what are called gonopods. So these are the reproductive male structures. They're on the underside of the body, usually up near the head. There are some millipedes that actually have them as the last segment, but those don't live here in the States. They're up near the head, and they look kind of like little crab claws when you flip them over. And basically, these are like a lock and key system. So each species has its own kind of pattern to the gonopods that it'll allow the female to know that this is the, proper species to mate with. A lot of these millipedes that I study, at least, are blind. So they don't seem to have any chemical communication. They just kind of bump into each other and try to mate. And so the feel of the gonopods is kind of the way they do it. And so that's the easiest way traditionally to tell them apart. But of course, we've gotten into molecular techniques recently. And this is just to show you the variety, wide variety of what gonopods can look like. And they're up here, usually near the head. For females, we use the vulvae, but it's really underrepresented in the literature, mainly because the vulvae you have to dissect. They're on the second pair, or the second body ring, and you have to dissect them, and a lot of it is membranous and doesn't really have much form to it. So it's very difficult to identify species using vulvae. However, a big part of that is because we haven't really looked at them traditionally. And so we're trying now, myself and my collaborators, when we describe new species, we try to describe the male and the female, not just the male's structures. And so there can be different interesting structures on the outside of the vulvae. However, a lot of these guys, these big, colorful millipedes we have around here, don't seem to have any unique structures, which is unfortunate, but again, it hasn't been looked at closely. All right, so let's talk about millipede ecology. So millipedes actually lack a waxy epicuticle. That's basically a layer of wax on the outside that most insects have. They have that wax to help conserve their water, inside their body. And millipedes don't have that. They never evolved it. So they need to live in really moist habitats. That being said, there are a few that have adapted to deserts, to grasslands, and high elevation, rocky, arid areas. But for the most part, you're going to find the highest diversity in moist gullies and things like that, especially here in Appalachia. As I said, they're mainly detritivores. Some people have claimed that they are carnivores because they found millipedes under carcasses of like pigs and things, but that's probably because they're attracted to the liquids coming out of the body, not so much the flesh. So I'm just going to say that. But they also eat, as I said, lichen and mushrooms, things like that. And they're everywhere in the world except for Antarctica. So you can find them all over. But they are most diverse in the tropics and Appalachians. So pretty cool that we live here. All right, there are lots of things that eat millipedes, tons of predators. This is a mammal in Madagascar that has a pill millipede. These are the spherical, about from golf ball up to like small baseball size millipedes that live in trees. And these guys, the millipedes can lock themselves into place, and they have a locking mechanism, and so you can't really pull them apart. So these I'm not sure what kind of mammal it is, but it has learned to smash them against rocks and break them open. There are also ants, and these ants have evolved to deal with a certain type of millipede that I will show you soon, which are called bristly millipedes. And they don't have a hard exoskeleton. They have urticating hairs like a tarantula. And so these guys, these ants, actually comb the hairs off of that millipede and then carry them back to their home, their nest, where they can feed on them. Then we have fin-goated beetles. These live here. This is actually an adult female beetle. It's called a larviform species, so it still looks like a baby beetle. It doesn't have any wings or anything. And they will actually, it's wild. I've seen this once. I got some footage of it, but they will basically run alongside one of these big, colorful hydrogen cyanide producing millipedes. They'll run alongside it while it's moving along, and they will leap over and strike them right in the neck and inject a paralyzing toxin that will stop the millipede from being able to release its chemical defenses. They will then chew the head off and then eat down the body and exit through the anus. Nature's beautiful, I know, right? I'm so glad I'm not an arthropod. It's rough, but they also glow at night. They are bioluminescent. So we have some here in the Appalachians that glow. They're called railroad worms because of that. Out west, there are ones that produce red and green colors, and they really look like a railroad, crossing sign or something. Salamanders are another big voracious predator of millipedes, especially baby millipedes because they're monsters. And then true bugs are also big predators, and some of them even sequester the chemicals from the millipedes, we think, as a defensive, to make themselves chemically defended. But we haven't proven that quite yet. We're just pretty sure. All right, so millipedes have tons of defense. Because all these things want to eat them, they have a lot of defensive methods. The most famous, of course, is rolling up, or as we in the scientist community call it, vulvation. It's very fancy, but they basically roll up to protect themselves. Some millipedes do this better than others. These guys, the big sausage millipedes, are really good at it. The zystidesmids, which are the hydrogen cyanide producing guys, are pretty good at it. Others just kind of cower, and they don't really curl up that well. But there you have it. And then, of course, I said, they've got chemical defenses. I've already told you about that. But basically, they have these glands here that produce different chemicals that then combust and combine inside and then are released through ozophores, which are little holes that go all the way down their body. And so you'll sometimes see some millipedes actually have them colored to especially accentuate their scariness. Here is an SEM to show you what an ozophore looks like. And then here is one that has them colored all the way down the body. This is actually an introduced species that you can find in caves, a lot of them in caves. Blaniolus gutillatus, which they're also under rocks and everything. You see them all the time, but they're very tiny. And then here you can actually see sometimes this kind of creamy stuff that comes out of the millipede. As I told a few people earlier in the night, you don't lick these. I have licked them before on a dare, and it's awful. It's a horrible taste. It's very, very spicy, and your tongue goes numb for a while. Don't recommend it, but they do that. All right, and then another defense that's very common is the opposite of having these chemical defenses and looking very impressive. Instead, they are cryptic. So this is a group in an area that I did a lot of my PhD on. They're super diverse. We've actually got a species here in the Shenandoahs that's only from the Shenandoahs. It's endemic to the Shenandoahs. So they're a very cool group, but a lot of them are really, really cryptic. So that means they blend into their background. They can have white or red along the side, and I'll say that when you're digging for them, because they'll live a little bit under the soil surface, when you see this white, it really looks like mycelium, like some kind of a fungus. When you look at it, you just think it's fungus. When it's red, it looks like clay flecks. They don't really pop out as a millipede whatsoever. So that's another good defensive strategy. Another possible defense is sociality. So this is being social. Not very many millipedes are social, but there are some, and they're here in Appalachia. This is Brachycybe lecontii, and they are called the pinwheel millipedes. You may have heard of them. If you go out into the woods around here, you're not going to find them, but if you go farther west, you will. On tulip tree logs, usually, and they are fungus feeders. So they will all gather around and feed on fungus, and they create these like pinwheels where all their heads are poking in, eating together, and their butts are all sticking out. And they all produce chemical defenses, and their main predator are ants. And so if there's one, if you separate one of these guys from the others, ants are more likely to attack it. When they're all together like this, ants leave them alone, because it's probably an overwhelming amount of chemical defense. So we think that being social provides some benefit. All right, and then the big famous one is aposematism. This is looking dangerous. So being colorful, advertising your chemical defenses. Neither of these live in Appalachia, but they are beautiful, so I decided to show them. But they all produce horrible toxins. So these guys, some of these big sausage millipedes from Africa and Asia actually produce enough chemical to burn the skin off of your hand. They can blacken your skin and then it'll slough off. So they can be really nasty. And they advertise that to predators by being colorful. That's basically getting, warning their predators, hey, I'm dangerous. So here in Appalachia, we have a whole bunch of these mimetic millipedes. So these guys all mimic each other and produce these mimicry rings. They all produce hydrogen cyanide. So that's what's called Mullerian mimicry, where everybody's dangerous. And we mainly have millipedes with contrasting black background with a yellow, orange, or red, pink, things like that that really, really pop, stand out. And you get all sorts of variety of these colors. And these are all Cherokea from around different states here, as I've got labeled. I guess they're all the same genus, I should say. Actually, the same species now. So these guys are all out during the day. So these are all diurnal species, and they are probably evolved for some large, visual predator like a turkey that's going to be removing leaves and is actually going to see this thing. Because remember, these guys are all blind, so they're not showing off for each other. This is all to show off against predators. So they're out during the day, but there are also aposematic millipedes for the night. So these guys live out in the Sierras in California, and they bioluminesce like a lightning bug. And I've actually gone and collected some of these. It's really incredible. You go out at night. You got to go. We would be out at like 4 a.m. And we're up in these cold mountains, of California, and you let your eye adjust, and they're just all over the place, glowing. It's really, really cool. And their main predator is a nocturnal mouse. And so the mouse is running around, hunting them. But if they're really, there was actually a study that my advisor did where he put out clay models of these things, and some of them he made, colorful, and others he didn't. And the ones that weren't colorful were destroyed by the mice. You could actually see the teeth imprints in the clay. So that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, we don't have any of those here, bioluminescing millipedes, but we do have fluorescing millipedes. So fluorescing is different. So bioluminescence is when you're producing your own light. Fluorescence is when you're reflecting light. So a lot of millipedes actually fluoresce under UV, and they glow. It's like a scorpion. If you've ever seen a scorpion glow under UV, millipedes, a lot of them do the same thing. And we think that this is aposematism for nocturnal predators for the UV that comes off of the moon. So anything that can see at night, because these guys are out at night. They're out during the day and they're out during the night. And anything that can see UV, they will be glowing to them. And so we think that that's aposematic. But it actually makes collecting millipedes at night pretty fun and easy. You walk around with a UV flashlight. And in California, we would drive with the light out the door, in the car, and then you'd pull over and see if it's a scorpion or a millipede. All right. So, I'm going to talk about mimicry. That's one of the coolest things that we have. I don't know that there's much millipede mimicry in the rest of the world. It kind of seems, for some reason, to be an Appalachian thing. But, I mean, not that anyone's, I don't think, really looked in the tropics, but here it's really, really pronounced. So many species of these Appalachian millipedes mimic each other. These are two distantly related species, and they look pretty similar. You know, to a predator, it's going to be almost exactly the same. And as I said, they're all poisonous, so it's Mullerian mimicry, and they help to get the message out to predators more quickly. I will say, though, that there's one group, Aphiloria, which is your cherry millipede, that is the most common around here, that they produce the most cyanide, and they have the brightest and cleanest cut colors. And then these other groups produce a little bit less cyanide, and their colors are a little drabber, and they've got kind of messy lines, and it's almost like they're not really contributing as much to the group project. So it is Mullerian mimicry, but it does seem a little lazy for some of them. I'm just gonna say. Now this was a spot from Cranberry Glades, West Virginia. This is the best mimicry I've ever seen. Or the coolest. These are three definitely distantly related groups. This species actually is more closely related to everything out west than it is to anything else here, but you can find it in the Shenandoahs. It's a real weird species. But in this spot in West Virginia, everything was striped orange. Every single thing, you know, 3 different genera all kind of converging together. So I thought that was exceptional. Next. Uh-oh. Has the battery died? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about, shifting gears a little bit, to a very cool ecological concept of microendemism. So an endemic species is something that is only known from a certain locality, and that area can be, you know, large or small, right? And so something can be endemic to the United States, for example. That's not that impressive, really. But other things can be endemic to a certain cave, like one cave. And that means that species is really, really restricted and threatened, right? I mean, any change to that one area could wipe them out. So an endemic species, when people talk about endemic species, they usually mean something with a small restricted area. Millipedes are what are called micro-range endemics. So this is a species that's very beautiful that is from right up on the Blue Ridge Parkway near Floyd that I worked on for one of my PhD chapters. And it was only found on one spot on the Blue Ridge Parkway near Mabry Mill. And that was it. It was only in this one spot. It had a range of less than 1 kilometer squared. And this is a pretty big size millipede that's just out in the forest, and you could find it fairly easily there, but you go right down the road and it's not there for whatever reason. And so a species that is micro-range endemic if it has a range of less than 1,000 kilometers squared. That sounds like a lot, but that's about 2.5 counties in Virginia. So for a species, you know, that's pretty small. That's not a very large ranging area. However, a lot of the millipedes that I study, I've only, you know, found in one gully. You know, just a gully that they've gotten stuck in. They need the water in that gully. They are flightless. They're blind. They're down there. They don't climb up to the top of the mountain and come down. You know, they are just in that gully, and they've been there for millennia. And if that gully gets filled in, you know, to make way for a condominium, then they're gone. You know, so that's one of the scarier things about these groups. But it makes what I do exciting to find new things and describe them. And so this concept of micro-range endemism is really, really common in the Zystidesmidae, and actually probably most millipedes, but of course the Zystidesmidae is what I have worked on the most. And for example, this genus Brachoria has a whole bunch of species, and 91% of them are all micro-range endemics. There's very few wide-ranging species. So it's really important to conserve these species. As I said, they're really, highly threatened by habitat loss, any change in their habitat. So climate change is a really big driver of extinction potentially for these. And then the concept of taxonomic anonymity, which is basically that we don't know that they exist. And so no one knows to protect that area because no one has looked to see if there is a species there. I found a micro-range endemic living or right outside of the president's house on Virginia Tech's campus, and it hadn't been described yet. And so I described it in an area Hokie, but it is only known from a very small range, and that's a widely used, probably polluted area, and it's still there, but that, you'd never think that there is a species there that calls that place its home, other than the president. All right, let's talk about some millipedes that you guys are probably going to encounter if you go out into the woods. This is the most common, unfortunately, millipede you're going to see. This is Oxydus gracilis, which is the greenhouse millipede. It is introduced from Asia. It has been here for over 100 years, and so it's now what we call naturalized. You can find it everywhere, even really remote areas. I have found them walking underwater in creeks. They seem to be able to, they'll have bubbles on them as they're walking underwater, so maybe they can trap oxygen. They are really, really hardy, and they smell terrible. They also produce hydrogen cyanide. They're flat-backed millipedes, but they don't produce the cherry smell along with it. They produce something else, and it's really nasty. These are the ones that you'll get in droves coming into your house, in your basement, things like that. You'll find them outside a lot, unfortunately. And they look like a little bead, a little string of brown beads. They're about 3/4 of an inch long or so. And then Aphyllary virginiensis is the cherry millipede. These are native. These are the very beautiful, pretty ones that might be the basis for all the mimicry rings. They're the ones that, do the most work in the group project. And you have them here, absolutely. You find them here very easily in this area. And they smell delightful, like cherries. I would recommend, so hydrogen cyanide itself is odorless, but the chemicals that come along with it are what give it that cherry smell. So you can kind of blow to get the cyanide away and then smell the cherry if you're so inclined. All right, and then this is Narcissus americanus, also known as the ironworm. You'll see these frequently climbing trees or crossing paths when you're out hiking. They are pretty harmless. This is usually what we let kids play with. They kind of their legs feel like Velcro across your skin. Really cool. They do have eyes. They have big eyes, and they're very pretty. I did hear a report tonight about someone getting sprayed almost in the eye by their chemicals, and that happened to me once too. It's very, very rare. Don't be scared of them. They should be fine. But these guys are really cool. They actually have this really charming characteristic of laying their eggs out of their vulvae, which is up by their neck, and then moving them all the way down with their legs, and then putting them into their butt and coating the egg with poop. And then they poop it back out. And so if you break open a stump, you'll find sometimes these big piles of little round poop balls. And those are eggs. And when those eggs hatch, they eat the poop, and they get the gut microbiome that allows them to break down wood and plant material. So it's very cute. Little poop babies. All right. This guy I call the smelly crested millipede. This is Abasion magnum. You'll see these a lot also. They're very black, like really dark, and they're pretty long. They can get like 2 inches long maybe. And they're beautiful. They have these wonderful, hit the wrong button, okay. They have these wonderful crests all along their body that especially like under high magnification, they look really cool. But they smell like manure, like straight up horse manure. It's pretty nasty. And if it gets on your skin, it's there for a while. So I would not handle, if you see any of these pretty crested millipedes, I wouldn't handle them. All right, then there's Nenaria. This is the twisted foot millipedes. These are the guys I talked about that were the ones that I've described the most species of and are from around here, and they're really, really specious, and we keep finding new species, and some of them live only in one gully. Others, Nenaria morrisoni is known only from the Shenandoahs, but it's known throughout the Shenandoahs. So it's known from the north to the south, and so it has a nice little protected area, that it lives in. But others are known from only, one spot in Wytheville that's just down in a gully. And they have all sorts of cool forms to their gonopods. Their gonopods are really diverse, so very cool group. All right, I'm going to be wrapping up here soon, so I'll talk about my current research. So as I said, I do a lot of species description and discovery, and I've been working on a few groups in other parts of the country, or other parts of the world, but mainly America. So I try to focus on, bringing up American myriapodologists. I have a PhD student in Brazil. I've got a student I'm working with in Chile, trying to get, more people into millipedes because, we've got lots of species here that are undescribed, but the tropics, it's a whole other, they're everywhere. There's just tons of new stuff. But I've also gotten into other groups, unfortunately. Not that I have the time, but I work with a guy, Cal Ivanov, who's given a couple talks for you all, and he is an ant specialist. And so I've started working with him on some ant work. We've started doing some isopod stuff. We started working on the isopods, which are roly-polies. They are not millipedes. They are distantly related, but they have the same general gestalt of rolling up. But we've started working on those because no one's studied them. And then spiders. Spiders are my new obsession. I love tiny spiders. This is a silly-looking little lima bean spider that's like, half a millimeter that I found at my house in Roanoke. And it is an undescribed thing. There's a guy who studies this group in Indiana. And he agrees that it might be the undescribed female of Dippoena appalachia, which is a spider species that the female's never been found. So I'm hoping that's what it is. But anyway, and then this is a new species that is desert or sand adapted. This is actually from right near Charleston, South Carolina, and I went down and found it on vacation with my family, and it has this really cool kind of sand color that blends it right in with the sandy substrate down there, so I need to describe that. All right, so I always put this up as an opportunity if anybody wants me to come out and look at their property and see if, what species, if they have a new species, anything like that, because I have named a few species after the people whose property it is that they let me on. However, I have now become so inundated with people wanting me to come out and look at their property because I give these kind of talks that I may not, I'm just going to say, I still would love to hear from you. I might not be able to get out this year or the next year, but sometime I would love to come out and check your property for millipedes and let you know what you have. I also just want to show off, this is, I think, my favorite millipede for its color, the most beautiful. This is the candy cane millipede, and you can find this in the Nantahala National Forest down in North Carolina, in like Highlands, North Carolina area. And it's just a really, it's got white. There's very few others that have white on them, so it's cool. All right, are there any questions? Thank you all for coming. I think Joe's going to be going around with a microphone, and here we go.
Yeah, thank you. How in the world did you get into this?
All right, so the question was, how in the world did I get into this? That's a great question. So I did my master's on honeybees, which are a little different, and I was working kind of in the agricultural realm. And as I was doing that, I was teaching insect biology at Virginia Tech, and I fell in love with taxonomy through that, with identifications, because most of that was in a lab setting. We would be IDing insects all the time. And so I wanted to get into taxonomy, but Virginia Tech did not have a taxonomist and hadn't had one for 21 years. But right as I was finishing my master's, we hired Dr. Paul Merrick, who is a millipede specialist and is the taxonomist. And so I, didn't know anything about millipedes. I had heard of them, but I just said, sure, let's do this. And I fell in love with them. They're wonderful. So, yeah. Yep.
You showed something about the sexuality of the organism. How many chromosomes, thinking genetically, how many chromosomes do they have? And is there typical XY sex chromosome characteristic?
Oh, man, that's a good question. That is beyond, unfortunately. Oh, so let me repeat the question. How many chromosomes do they have, and do they have typical XY chromosomes? I am not 100% sure. I don't think we are at that point yet, even with this, with millipedes. I apologize, but we have sequenced a few genomes, but it's really early on still. The lab at Virginia Tech that Paul Merrick has that I went to was one of the only in the world doing genetics at the time. So it's still very new for us. And right now we're still just trying to scramble to describe species. So I apologize, I can't. I could lie and tell you something, but I'm just gonna say I don't know. Honestly, I'd have to look it up if we even know.
Can you tell us the difference between cyanide, hydrogen cyanide? Is that what you mean? And can you actually come up with a big enough poison by mashing up some millipedes?
Wait, can you repeat? So, what's the difference between hydrogen cyanide and what?
And cyanide.
Oh, and normal cyanide.
Yeah, the normal cyanide.
I am not a chemical ecologist. I don't know. I mean, I assume the hydrogen. Do you know? Yeah. You want to explain?
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was the same thing. Okay, so the next question is, how old were you when you took the dare and licked that bug?
Oh, I was embarrassingly old. She asked how old I was when I took that dare. That was during my PhD. And that was my PhD advisor who dared me. And I told him he had to do it too, and he did. And we had a third person with us to help us get out of the woods if that need be. But yeah, I was probably like 30-something. Yeah. Do it again? Is it? No, it was horrible. Yeah, no. It's really nasty. It's really bad. It's like eating spicy food, but without any delay. It just kicks you right away, and it was and also it's just stupid of me to do.
So here's your chemistry lesson for tonight. Cyanide is made of carbon and nitrogen, CN. And it is an anion, meaning it can be made into a salt. And so you can have sodium cyanide. Hydrogen cyanide just has hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen. And so there's various forms of cyanide, just like there's various forms of chloride. You may know that there's sodium chloride, calcium chloride. So there's your chemistry lesson for tonight.
Is hydrogen cyanide more or less dangerous than cyanide?
I'm not sure of the toxicology exactly, but the cyanide is what's toxic.
Okay.
So the cyanide part of the substance is the CN part of that molecule is toxic. So whether it's paired with hydrogen or whether it's paired with sodium, that is innocuous.
Okay.
But the cyanide part is what kills you. And I don't know if there's enough in a millipede or a bunch of millipedes
I will
to
say
actually
that.
kill you.
So one of these guys, these afluorines, which are these colorful ones, produce enough hydrogen cyanide to kill 18 pigeon-sized birds. That's if they release it all at once, and that might sound like a lot, but it's nothing compared to a human. So you would get very sick, I think, if you ate one of these, if you somehow chewed through the pain. But I will also say this is a species that I found on my bachelor party in North Carolina in Weaverville, outside of Asheville, and it was just a female. So I didn't know what it was, but it has this really cool, like, kind of pinkish color. And I sequenced it, and it's a totally different species, but I've never been able to find it again. So I have to have a second bachelor party, I think, is what that means.
How did millipedes get the name millipedes without 1,000 legs?
So the question was, how do millipedes get the name millipede? I guess, if they didn't have 1,000 legs before. So I think it was just to differentiate them from centipedes. So they probably saw centipedes first and were like, wow, that's got to be like 100 legs. Like, that's a centipede. And then they saw a millipede and were like, well, that's got to be like 1,000 legs, right? And so that was probably, I doubt if anyone wanted to sit down. We had to count the Eumillipes Persephone, and Paul Merrick did it at Virginia Tech, and it was a laborious process, taking photographs and doing it in sections.
You got a question?
One day will millipedes be able to fly?
He said, what date? You want a date?
Or will they ever be able to fly?
Will they ever be able to fly? I have a friend who's a accomplished entomologist, and that is his number one question every time I bring up millipedes is, have you found the flying one yet? And I you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if there was some tropical species that had expanded perinota, which are these things on the side, and that could glide from tree to tree or something. So, and maybe undulate in the air someday. I'm keeping my eyes open.
Do we have any other questions? We have one more.
What's the life cycle like?
So the question was, what's the life cycle like? So again, this is going to vary amongst millipedes. And it's very, very little is known, right, about a lot of these groups. For these zystidesmids, it seems like they basically have 1 or 2 broods a year, and they'll overwinter as adults and as immatures. And it seems like females live about 2 years, males live just 1 year. It seems that they, kind of mature up in spring, and then kind of go underground during the dry seasons, and then come back up in the fall, mate, and the males die off and the females overwinter. But we've also found, immatures throughout the year. So there does seem to be kind of a it's kind of a smear. There is a species that was recently shown. It was known for a long time in Japan, called the train millipede, because they would swarm in such large numbers that it would derail trains in Japan when they rode over them. It doesn't anymore. They've improved their technology, but it was a problem. And they recently found that they swarm every certain number of, I think it was about 7 years. So it was kind of like the cicadas, where they would be underground as immatures for a very long time, and then they'd all burst up as adults and have these mating, bonanzas and derail trains. So it varies, and that's in the same family. That is Parareucharia is in the same family as these guys. So they're closely related, more or less, and yet they have this weird, cyclical, periodical, life cycle. So.
I'm going to suggest we end the evening off on locomotive derailment, right? And so Dr. Means will stick around to answer some questions one-on-one, so please come up and introduce yourself and ask your questions. But I just want to say thank you again for coming out tonight. No lecture next month, and so look for the lecture schedule to come out in early January. So thank you very much for coming.